I am here to talk about a very relevant topic today, conducting a job search during what we're currently dealing with, this pandemic, this crisis. As a quick introduction, my name is Sheila Boysen, and I'm a Master's Certified Leadership and Career Coach. My industry background is predominantly in human resources, in talent acquisition, talent management, and talent development. I've been coaching and teaching at the undergrad and graduate level for over 10 years. I am passionate about helping others to achieve their ideal careers. As we dive into this topic today, we are dealing with unprecedented circumstances right now, and the idea of a job search process can feel daunting. However, companies are hiring and people are landing jobs every day. So in this presentation, I want to talk about some tips to help you to be successful with your job search right now. Let's chat a little bit about our roadmap for today. Here are the main topics that we're going to talk about: how to talk about COVID-19 during your job search, interviewing during this pandemic, what industries and companies are actually hiring right now, considering the gig economy, if that would be something of value based on your specific situation, virtual networking, and getting comfortable with using video. So talking about the coronavirus, using what I call smart stories. So when we say smart stories, the idea is that as we continue to network and interview, engaging in this job search process right now, it will be hard to avoid the topic of the coronavirus and COVID-19. It's today's version about talking about the weather, right? It comes up in every conversation. So it might actually be hard or even feel weird not to address it in the conversations that you're having. So rather than trying to ignore that elephant in the room, you're going to want to think about how you can strategically address the pandemic and speak to it in a way that showcases who you are and what you bring to the table. Specifically, I encourage you to think about smart stories. In other words, write out talking points of stories that exemplify productive aspects of how you're handling this challenge. A few examples of how you might want to think about some example stories would be creating some narrative around how you've been very adaptable during the pandemic. For example, have you needed to homeschool your children or dramatically shift your routine? Talk about your positivity. How have you maintained a positive attitude and inspired others? Talk about how you've learned and embraced and used new technology. Now, in our very virtual communication mode, many of us are finding new ways or learning new technology. And lastly, consider talking about how you personally found creative ways to build community and collaboration with others during these challenging times. So let's shift gears a little bit to talk about interviewing. As we talk about interviewing, the number of companies around the globe that are asking their employees to work from home really has increased every day. In the United States, all non-essential business is working from home. So with that happening, recruiters and managers are being forced to move their hiring processes online as well. The most immediate challenge will likely be, as we're already seeing, companies switching in-person interviews to video. And while the substance of those interviews is ultimately the same, video interviews differ a little bit from in-person meetings. So let's chat a bit about what to expect during this process. Companies are always proud when they're able to quickly fill positions. They may be less concerned about that measure right now during the pandemic, though. In other words, companies may take longer to make you an offer, especially for senior level positions. Another issue is that it's likely more difficult to get all those stakeholders and decision makers to weigh in on a job candidate to make a decision. Because if everyone's going to be out of the office working remotely and not meeting regularly or working alongside each other as they're so used to, it might be a little bit more challenging to get everyone on the same page, so to speak. So while no one wants to take part in a prolonged hiring process, we need to remember that we're currently dealing with these unprecedented circumstances. If you want to land a job, you're going to need to continue engaging in these processes no matter how long it takes to be considered for these roles. Do your research. That's an important part of this process. So fortunately, this step is actually very similar compared to what you probably were doing before the pandemic situation, doing research. The key is to do as much research ahead of an interview as possible. During your research, it's important to find potential topics of conversation that you can hold or have with the interviewer or interviewers that you're going to be talking about. Video interviews tend to contain less small talk, and often they actually are shorter than in-person meetings. So it's even more important that you make an effort to form a bond with the person on the other side of that screen. It might be good to look for things to talk about on the interviewer's LinkedIn profile, for example. Maybe they made a post recently, shared an article. A specific example might be that you have seen a recruiter or hiring manager was recently interviewed, maybe in a podcast. Listen to the podcast and then mention that topic in the interview. It gives you something to talk about and to build that rapport and that connection. Next, when we're talking about this video interviewing process, it's important to prepare your space and to practice. So when we think about that, unlike in-person interviews, those that are done by video often open up a window to our personal lives. And as humans, sometimes we make, whether it's conscious or unconscious, decisions about what people's spaces or homes look like. So we don't want to let recruiters or hiring managers see a messy environment filled with mountains of paper, crooked picture frames, or laundry. Instead, opt for a neutral background with good lighting. And make sure the camera's at eye level to avoid any of those unflattering angles. A benefit to that video interview is that you can have notes in front of you or around your workspace or even pulled up on your computer potentially. The person on the other end of the video doesn't necessarily have to know that. So that's a little bit different than face-to-face interviews. Also, if you have dual monitors, you can have one for the interview and you can have one with your notes pulled up. So that's another thing to think about. Lastly, you want to practice talking to the camera. This is actually more complicated than it seems. One trick that might sound a little bit silly, but actually works well, is to put something like a pair of googly eyes right near your camera lens. And this will encourage you to look at the camera during the interview instead of down or off to the side. You want to make sure that you have good eye contact with the video interview, just as you would want to have if you were interviewing face to face. Let's move on to talk a little bit about during the interview. While many of the formal job interview questions will be the same whether you're in person or on video, you want to ask for specific information about the company's hiring timeline. Also, you should ask if the position will be remote until the pandemic is over and how that onboarding process will proceed if the company does continue to work remotely for a little bit longer. So they may not know the exact answer to how long the process is going to take, but it helps to ask the question so you can understand a little bit more about what that process might look like. And it will help you to prepare if the training or the first part of your job is going to be conducted remotely. It's also another way just to show your engagement and your excitement to get started. It's very important during a video interview to tell the recruiter or the hiring manager how interested you are in the opportunity. Of course, I recommend doing this in a face-to-face interview, but again, because we're looking for those opportunities to accentuate building rapport, and because that can be a little bit more challenging to do sometimes via video, it makes this step even more important. Thank the person for their time and tell them how impressed you are with the team and say how honored you are to be considered for the position. Basically, your goal is to leave no doubt in the hiring manager's mind that you want to be there. Additionally, expect the unexpected during these next few weeks while people are working from home. While everyone will want to continue with their professional tasks, life can sometimes get in the way when we have children, pets, even the doorbell intruding on our video interviews. I've already been in a few meetings where we've had the opportunity to laugh at a cute rogue toddler who was in the background. So As the coronavirus continues to spread in the United States and globally, the number of virus related job postings are actually increasing. So let's pivot a little bit to talk about what are some of these industries and these companies that actually are hiring or even increasing their hiring right now. So, although some industries like traveling have put a temporary halt on hiring, industries such as the government, biotech, pharmaceuticals, anything relating to healthcare, and the nonprofit industry have actually tripled in the US as a direct response of this outbreak. So, when looking specifically at job listings, sometimes even using the terminology of coronavirus or COVID-19 in your searching and your Boolean logic can help you to find some positions that have been newly created. So, that's one thing to think about that's a little bit different. And as we think about a few examples of specific companies that are hiring right now, as well as industries, shipping and delivering companies are booming. Amazon, for example, is hiring throughout their entire organization. Online learning companies, now that over 30 million children are out of school, it's boom time for online schools, which are swiftly expanding their capacity. One example is OutSchool, and they're hiring thousands of teachers and professionals that will be part of the organization to meet this demand. All aspects of different grocery store and grocery delivery services throughout their corporate chain are also hiring. Remote meeting and communications companies and that industry is also in a hiring boom. So we think about things like Zoom, Slack, and Microsoft Teams. So these industries and companies give us some direction of where to look for current openings and opportunities. There's also currently a boom in the gig economy right now. If that would fit your needs or provide for some needed temporary employment, it's worth considering. A few tips when it comes to the gig economy include things like networking, of course, from a distance. So, although many companies are now operating remotely, there's still a ton of work to be done. Reach out to your contacts in your personal and professional networks about meeting up for a virtual coffee chat. Ask them for help discovering different freelance jobs that they're aware of, things that can be done completely virtually. Join an online marketplace or one of those on demand apps. The need for some of the services that gig workers provide may very well actually be on the rise as a result of the spread of the coronavirus. For example, many people are staying home to self quarantine, which is what we're supposed to do. So that means more people are looking for food delivery. Or so this could be a good time to sign up as a delivery driver for things like Uber Eats or Postmates or DoorDash. Eat Street and Grubhub are a couple other ones. Others might still cook at home, but want to avoid going to the grocery store, so are looking for those types of grocery delivery, like Instacart. Regardless of what area or specific type of gig work you're interested in, it's a great time to update your portfolio on these different apps and different gig economy websites. Take the time to update that online portfolio and specifically ensure that it showcases your ability to simultaneously juggle multiple projects as an experienced gig worker. So examples of this might be freelance work that you've done in the past or times that you've juggled a number of different projects at the same time. This is also a great time to really reflect on and consider your transferable skills. Consider the range of skills that you draw on daily to complete your very tasks, and how might you be able to apply them in a different type of job. For example, if you've honed your communication and customer service skills as a rideshare driver or dog walker, you could really expand on that. Explore opportunities where you can put these strengths to use as a remote representative at a call center, maybe, just to name a couple examples. If you have a background in a certain field, but maybe you've let those skills lapse as you've pursued other experiences, sign up for an online course to regain or refresh that expertise. And don't forget to add any new certifications or credentials to your resume and online profiles. As we talk about virtual networking, there's a number of important things to mention. First, although we normally think of networking as a face-to-face activity, it's important to pivot here and really reframe how we think about this. How can we take those interactions that previously were face-to-face and make them virtual? So make networking adjustments. Instead of meeting at a coffee shop for coffee, set up a virtual coffee meeting. Whether you were having these face-to-face interactions for your informational interviews, maybe pivot those, have those virtually via video. Make sure you complete your social media profiles. As we are feeling this big push to move online, we might actually see more people leveraging social media as they're researching people, as they're checking up on potential hires and getting to know you a little bit better. So make sure your social media profiles are complete and represent you professionally. Share your knowledge. This is a great time to use things like question and answer forums or LinkedIn groups to answer questions, share information, and be of service in a way that showcases your ability, your skills, and your knowledge. And join relevant social media groups. So an example would be the different LinkedIn groups. Actually, the more groups that you're a part of on LinkedIn, the higher you rise in search when recruiters are looking for people with your skills and your talent. Then let's talk a bit about the importance of getting comfortable with video. So this might sound a little bit scary, but don't panic. Let's talk about what this actually means for you. As we've already touched on, there's a good chance that all of your upcoming interviews are going to be moved to a video format. So let's chat a bit about some of those tips and best practices. First, test your internet connection. Check your internet connection and speed to ensure that your video will come across smoothly. It's also a good idea to download any of the virtual meeting tools that you are informed you're going to be using for interviews, just to make sure you're set up and that you can do a couple test runs before the real deal. And prepare your interview space. Just expanding on this that we've already touched on a little bit. Since we'll be doing the interviews from home, choose a quiet, well-lit space with a neutral background. And remember that video interviews give that peek into your personal life. So make sure the space is clean, free of distractions as much as possible, and keep pets and those other family members in another room during the actual interview process. Think about turning off your phone and any other computer notifications that might interrupt your interview. And dress like you're actually going in for a face-to-face interview. Even though you're not in an in-person interview, you're still representing yourself as a professional and you want to look that part. So it might feel a little silly dressing up just to stay home, but appearance matters in a video interview just as much as it would in person. And then maintain that eye contact. So use the googly eye trick if you have to. But it's going to feel a little bit unnatural at first as you get used to this, because when you're looking at your computer screen, a lot of times you're looking at the person on video. And often when we do that, it ends up making it look like we're looking a little bit down. So when you are talking and not needing to look at your notes, I actually recommend making sure to look at your camera instead of looking at the video of the other person, to help kind of showcase that eye contact and build that connection. Say no to swivel chairs. You might have the cutest home office with a comfortable swivel chair that you absolutely love from an aesthetic standpoint. However, that is not for interviews. This is because these chairs move, and it's our body's natural instinct to move, especially if we're a little bit anxious, which oftentimes many of us are when we're in an interview setting. So this can make us appear fidgety or nervous to the interviewer. So it's best to find a stationary chair to avoid any opportunity to look like we're fidgeting. And then no winging it. So we must do at least one run through before the actual video interview. For a video interview, the hiring manager or the recruiter will want to use some type of video service like Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts. So it's important that you test this and you have a chance to make sure that, again, the internet's working, that you've downloaded everything that you need to, and you're ready to go. Lastly, be genuine and patient. If you really want the job, make that crystal clear in your thank you at the end of the interview and the thank you email that you send after. This applies if you're not interested in the role as well, because you really do want to make sure that you are coming across as professionally and as engaged as possible. And finally, be patient with the recruiter and the hiring manager, especially if it's taking longer than usual to get back to you. Hiring requires buy in and approval from a number of different people and layers within the organization. And without that ability for everyone to be physically in the same space as they might be used to give that feedback and collective agreement, this might take a little bit longer than we're used to when it comes to getting a decision. So, just a reminder to give everyone that little bit of grace and extra patience during this process. Lastly, it's a good idea to actually think about investing in, and it might not even take an investment because a lot of the video conferencing tools that even previously did have a price tag or subscription fee, a lot of these companies are offering, at least temporarily, free opportunities to have these tools due to the pandemic. So it's a great idea, since we'll all be having more video meetings, to actually get a video conferencing tool on your computer if you don't already have one. On the screen here, you can see a number, and this actually is not an exhaustive list. There's many others out there. So do some research and explore the different features and costs and options, and pick one that you think works well for you. This way, you have one that you can proactively use when you are sending out meetings to meet with other people for coffee chats, networking conversations, and informational interviews. So, in summary, we are dealing with unprecedented circumstances right now. And again, I understand that idea of a job search can feel a little bit overwhelming. However, companies are still hiring, people are still landing jobs. So, you've got this. Take some of these tips and apply them. And remember to take care of yourself during the process.